The Accountant General cannot report to you. The Minister cannot report to you. It breaches the chain of command or whatever language was in that letter. I don't see a responsible house anywhere in the world agreeing to such. So, and I don't even know why or who advised Mr. President to say, what is he worried about? Let's assume for argument's sake that, oh, okay, perhaps you had no right to or whatever. How does it hurt the presidency for the National Assembly to say, Accountant General, I want to see the books? Now, if, for instance, we didn't put those clauses, what Mr. President is saying is that every quarter, the House or the Appropriations Committee or the Finance Committee cannot write to the Accountant General and say, oh, can I see the books on your releases, on the performance of the body, or can I write to the minister? That's what he's saying. Where is that done in the world?
Sorry, let me come to you. Why does this persist? I mean, everybody in the powers are clearly, responsibilities, powers, everybody's oversight functions are clearly stated out. But why do we keep getting to the point where, find a situation where both parties keep arguing and then we can't seem to see that line, that separates who has to do what or who has what responsibility?
Okay. As Femi rightly indicated, they do have oversight functions, and nobody can take that away from the National Assembly. And they do have rights to investigate and review for the purposes of passing the budgets. I think where the problem lies, and let's take it from where Femi spoke on the floor of the House, where they refuse to allocate any money at all to a parastatal of government, that is SEC, Security and Exchange Commission. Before I talk about that, perhaps I should explain the importance of the capital market and the regulator to the whole budgetary exercise. And I think that is perhaps one issue that is lost on most of us. If you look at the budget very carefully, they've allocated a certain amount of money to the dualization of the road from Ibadan to Ilorin. The estimate to fix that road, to dualize it, is 47 billion. Okay? So far, they've spent 13 billion. And in 2013, the allocation was just 2 billion. What it means, if there's an average of 2 billion allocation yearly, it's going to take 17 years to complete that project. So you have a structural defect in the entirety of the project. So what do? You fund a part of this infrastructural project through the capital market, through sophisticated schemes. And so, for example, if you were to fund that road and you didn't want to toll it, you do what we call shadow tolls. So government will basically raise money from the domestic capital markets and then continue to budget 2 million, but you do have your dualization of the road and you have your infrastructure. So we've been saying there are alternative ways. You cannot fund a major project through the balance sheet of the government. Now, so you need the capital market to supplement the budget. You need the regulator.
I was talking about domestic borrowing.
Right.
Okay.
You need the regulator to also ensure that this is done properly. Then you have the National Assembly holding money to the regulator and the capital market that will actually assist you to fund infrastructure. You have a totality of 168 billion, now to be shared between 100 roads. At an average of 500 million naira per kilo, you can only work on 4 kilometers of roads of the 100 that is spread out, which means you cannot have any major impact, no capital impact on the economy, which is what should be happening, capital expenditure. What that therefore means is that the National Assembly should be working very closely with the capital market and asking the relevant questions. That's an oversight function. Why are we not using sophisticated schemes to fund the market? Yet, they refuse to allocate any monies to SEC. That is unconstitutional because SEC is a creation of the Constitution. You cannot therefore pass, I think they passed a law which sort of basically extinguishes that institution without amending the Constitution. So if that is the clause that is in the budget, we haven't seen the budget. If that is the clause they put there, it is unconstitutional, it is illegal, it is unacceptable. It's a wrong exercise of discretion.
Now, Femi, for that clause in the budget, the executive did say that that is hampering the smooth running of the SEC, which you, of course, disagreed. You did say that disregarding the resolution of the House is actually what has shut down the SEC, even though we know that the institution is still running and they're still, playing their functions as the apex regulator of the capital market.
Well, first of all, you have to understand, first, I'm not aware of any time SEC has ever funded or helped in funding the execution
Well, they're
of
the regulator. If a company...
Yeah. No, I was speaking to what he said earlier, the point about roads and all that. But back to the clause. You need to understand, first of all, what happened with SEC. There was an investigation. There was an outcry by Nigerians, by operators. There was a problem with SEC. The National Assembly, as it's constitutionally empowered, decided to investigate SEC. In investigating SEC, National Assembly comes up with a report. Don't forget that there was a public hearing. Experts were there, operators were there, SEC workers were there, and it came out with a report, a very objective report that, listen, this woman is not competent, is not competent to handle the affairs of SEC for several reasons, but most importantly for legal reasons by the act, the set of SEC. Now,
like you're referring to her qualifications?
Yes.
Okay.
Apart from other reasons. Now, for me, it doesn't make sense for a responsible body that is empowered with a purse, that has the power of appropriation, to say on one hand, you're not qualified, and on the other hand, to say, hey, even though you're not qualified by law, here's money, go spend it. You cannot speak as a responsible arm of government from both sides of the mouth, like we know others do. So, as far as the legislative arm is concerned, we've said, based on investigation, you see, we passed the law. It is that same institution that passed the law. So it is difficult for anybody to, you don't have the monopoly of wisdom in terms of interpreting the law, but I think you have an advantage when you're interpreting that law to know exactly what law, or what was in your head at the time you were making the law. You do not have 15 years
Cognate experience
in capital market operations. It's simple as ABC.
But do you know, are you aware that during the investigation there were several arguments at that time that part of that investigation was actually flawed, it wasn't thorough, and that when the capital market, at the time it crashed, the current SEC DG wasn't there at that time, and when people were called, operators were called, and some of the leadership of the Apex regulator were called, the person who was the DG at that time wasn't called. She was one who, for want of a better phrase, was the one who, the current SEC DG, Aruma Ute.
She wasn't what?
She wasn't the DG when the market actually crashed.
Yeah, who wasn't called?
Because I remember the investigation there was looking into the causes of the capital market crash. But she wasn't there. But she, in a way, came into as well damage control, if we call it that.
Yeah.
But it looks like at some point she did take the fall for that, according to those arguments then. But now the House is tying, what happened to the fact that she's not competent and she's not qualified, 15 years capital market cognate experience, as it were. You talked about the fact that you can't release funds to her. You're not sure if she's capable enough to handle such funds. But were there instances where staff complained that monies were being mismanaged? Part of the arguments that I'm talking about, these are not my own. I'm not saying this. I'm just saying part of the argument that did arise as a result of that investigation.
Well, if you're talking about mismanagement, yes, a lot of members of SEC, in fact, an overwhelming majority of the members of the members of SEC complained, including directors.
Misappropriation of funds.
Misappropriation, mismanagement, and the rest of it. But back to the issue of her qualifications. The argument, or the flip side of the argument, is that we should ignore it. And you can't do that. Because he talked about the Constitution says you cannot spend money. Any public fund, whether it's internally generated or not, it's a public fund, except in a manner prescribed by the National Assembly. Now, if you disagree, the National Assembly has discharged its responsibility. If you disagree, what do you do in a democracy? You go to court. You don't disregard or disobey because of a single individual. You don't. You go to court. And once a court makes a pronouncement, all parties abide by it. That is the essence of democracy. We may be wrong. But we've done what we feel objectively.
You may be wrong, but you have to be right, because if you're being guided by the law, you have to be right on this one.
Well, no. We believe we're right. But I'm saying without considering, we may be wrong. Nobody's infallible. The presidency may be wrong. We may be wrong. Who determines that? The courts.
Okay, let me bring in Osaro here, perhaps because there has been another argument that, okay, fine, if we, instead of keep going back and forth over this issue, the executive doesn't want to implement it, doesn't want the SEC, the DG to go, perhaps we can go to the court, the judiciary, for them to interpret all of this.
Absolutely. But what the National Assembly has done, with the greatest respect to them, is to seek to implement their resolution.